What if a desperate mother, struggling to survive, delivered food to a billionaire's doorstep, only to be met with a proposition so shocking it could change her life and her daughter's forever? Could this be a lifeline or a gilded cage? "Hey, lady, are you here or what?" A gruff voice barked from the other side of the massive iron gate. Isabella Rossi took a deep breath, her legs trembling after cycling nearly 20 blocks with her 3-year-old daughter, Sophia, strapped securely to her back. The little girl was fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos that was her mother's life. "Yes, I'm here. Sorry for the delay," Isabella called back, trying to sound calm as she juggled the heavy bags of takeout food. The gate creaked open, revealing a tall man dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit. His face showed no trace of understanding for Isabella's disheveled state, sweaty, her hair escaping its messy bun, her clothes damp from the rain that had fallen half an hour earlier. "It's 8:15. I said 8 o'clock sharp," the man reprimanded, his cold eyes raking over her from head to toe. "I know, sir, but the traffic was terrible and I'm not interested." His voice was sharp, dismissive. "Next time, be on time or find another job." Isabella clenched her teeth, swallowing her pride. She needed this money more than she needed her dignity. Sophia stirred slightly on her back but thankfully remained asleep. "Where would you like me to put the food?" she asked, deliberately ignoring his cutting remark. The man led her towards a kitchen that was larger than the entire cramped room she and Sophia called home. The white walls gleamed under perfectly installed LED lights. Everything smelled of clean, expensive sterility. "Here on the island," he instructed, gesturing towards a massive marble countertop in the center. As Isabella arranged the containers, the man observed her with a strange expression. It wasn't exactly contempt, but something more akin to curiosity. "Aren't you the young woman who was on the news a couple of years ago?" he asked suddenly, his voice unexpectedly thoughtful. Isabella tensed, her blood running cold. She turned slowly to face him. "I don't know what you're talking about." Yes, you are," he insisted, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "The teacher who confronted the Herrera family for defending a student. You were on all the news channels." "I already told you, I don't know what you're talking about," Isabella repeated, but her voice trembled slightly. The man smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. It wasn't a mocking smile, but a contemplative one. "You were fired from the school after that, weren't you? And no other school would hire you because the Herreras have too many connections." Isabella didn't respond, just clenched the empty delivery bags tighter. "That's why you're delivering food on a bicycle with your daughter on your back," he continued, his voice softer now. "It must be difficult. Are you going to pay me or not?" Isabella asked, her patience wearing thin, suddenly tired of the conversation, of him. The man pulled out his wallet and handed her the money. But when she reached for the bills, he didn't immediately release them. "My name is Julian Vance," he said, his gaze intense, "and I believe we could help each other. I don't need help from anyone. Are you sure?" His eyes scanned her worn clothes, her tired face. "Because from what I see, you do. And I have a problem that someone like you could solve." Isabella finally managed to grab the money and quickly stuffed it into her jacket pocket. "I don't know what kind of problem you have, sir, but I'm not that kind of woman." Julian laughed, but not offensively. "It's not what you think. Something completely different. Something that could greatly benefit you." "Look, Mr. Vance," Isabella said, turning towards the door. "I just came to deliver food. If you need anything else, find someone else." She headed for the door, but Julian followed her. "How much do you earn a month delivering food?" She stopped but didn't turn around. "Enough. I bet it's not. I bet it barely covers the room where you live and your daughter's food. And I bet you don't have a single dollar saved for emergencies." Isabella felt tears welling in her eyes, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "What do you want from me?" "For you to listen to me. Just 5 minutes. If you're not interested in my proposal, you leave, and you'll never see me again." Sophia woke up at that moment and started to cry softly. "Mommy, I'm hungry." the little girl murmured. Isabella quickly took her offer back and held her in her arms. Sophia was small for her age, but she felt incredibly heavy after hours of carrying her. "Sure, sweetie. We'll go home soon so you can eat." Julian observed them both, and something in his expression shifted. He looked less harsh, more human. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Sophia." The little girl responded without shyness, peeking at him from her mother's shoulder. "Pretty name. Are you hungry, Sophia?" The little girl nodded. "There's yogurt and cookies in the kitchen. Want some?" Sophia looked at her mother, silently asking for permission. Isabella hesitated, but the hunger in her daughter's eyes convinced her. "Only if it's no bother." "Not at all." Julian went to the kitchen and returned with a ceramic bowl filled with yogurt, a bowl that probably cost more than everything Isabella owned. "Now then," he said, once the little girl began to eat contentedly. "Will you give me those 5 minutes?" Isabella looked at her daughter, happily enjoying her yogurt, then back at Julian. She didn't know why, but something told her that her life was about to change. Forever. 5 minutes, she accepted. "But then I'm leaving." Julian smiled again, and for the first time, Isabella noticed he had green eyes. Very green. "You're going to be interested in what I have to say, Isabella." She didn't remember telling him her name. "How do you know my name?" Isabella Rossi asked, clutching Sophia tighter, her heart pounding with a sudden, sharp apprehension. "It's on your delivery ID," Julian Vance responded, gesturing to the identification card hanging from her neck. "Relax." Isabella felt foolish, but she didn't lower her guard. "Speak. What do you want?" Julian leaned back against the gleaming marble island, crossing his arms, his green eyes studying her intently. "I need a wife." "Excuse me?" Isabella blinked, certain she had misheard. "Temporary. Just for a few weeks," he clarified, his voice calm, almost casual. "I have important meetings with foreign investors, and they highly value a stable family image. A single man, in their eyes, doesn't inspire confidence when it comes to managing millions." Isabella stared at him, speechless, trying to process the sheer audacity of his words. "You're asking me to marry you?" "Not exactly," he corrected, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Just to pretend to be my wife during some meetings and social events. Nothing more." "You're insane," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Why? It's a job like any other. You need money. I need a family that looks real. Sophia would be perfect as my daughter." Isabella stood up abruptly, her protective instincts flaring. "My daughter is not part of any act." "Isabella, listen to me carefully." Julian stood too, his voice suddenly serious. "I would pay you $50,000 a month. You would both live here in this house. Sophia would have her own room, food every day, and she could attend a good school." $50,000? Isabella felt the air leave her lungs. "Each month? For a maximum of 3 months. With that money, she could pay all her debts and even save something, secure Sophia's future." "And what exactly would I have to do?" "Accompany me to dinners, meetings, some social events. Act as if we were a happy family. Nothing physical, nothing strange. Just acting." "Why me?" she pressed, still struggling to comprehend. "Surely you know women who are more elegant, more suitable for this role." "Because you're real," Julian stated, his gaze piercing. "You're a mother. You have a history, a personality. The investors will believe we're a real couple because you don't act like the women in my usual social circle. You're not after my money. You're fighting for your child." Sophia finished her yogurt and approached Julian, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Do you have more?" she asked, her sweet little voice a stark contrast to the heavy tension in the room. "Of course, princess," he responded, his voice softening as he served her more. Isabella watched their interaction, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in her chest. It had been so long since a man had treated her daughter with such kindness, such gentle attention. "When do you need an answer?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now." "Now?" You haven't even given me time to think. Because there isn't any time. The first meeting is on Friday. Today is Tuesday. Isabella sat down again, burying her face in her hands, her mind a chaotic whirlwind. Her phone buzzed at that moment. It was a text message. Mrs. Rossi, you have until Friday to pay the overdue rent, or you will have to vacate the room.
No exceptions.
Mrs. Martinez. Her hands trembled as she read the message. Julian noticed her expression, the sudden wave of despair that washed over her. Bad news. They're going to evict me from where I live. How much do you owe?
$600.
2 months' rent. Julian pulled out his wallet and counted out the bills. Here's the 600. As an advance. I can't accept this. Why not? You're going to work for me anyway. I haven't said yes yet. But you will, he stated with an unnerving confidence. Because you have no other option. And because this is a good opportunity for you and for Sophia. Isabella looked at her daughter, who was now happily playing with the kitchen spoons, oblivious to the monumental decision weighing on her mother's shoulders. Then she looked at the money on the table, a tangible symbol of a desperate, yet undeniably alluring, escape. What are the rules? She finally asked, her voice heavy with resignation. Simple, Julian replied, his green eyes glinting. During the day, you live your normal life. At night, when there are events, you act as my wife. You both sleep here in separate rooms, of course. I respect your space. You respect mine. At the end of the contract, we each go our separate ways. And if it doesn't work out, then we terminate the agreement, and I pay you for the time you've worked. Isabella took a deep, shaky breath. It was risky, unorthodox, almost surreal. But it was also her only way out, her only chance to give Sophia the life she deserved. When do we start? You move in tomorrow. Thursday, we buy clothes for the events. Friday is the first test. Isabella took the money from the table, her hand surprisingly steady. I accept. She paused, then added, her voice firm, unwavering. But if you disrespect me or my daughter, if this becomes anything more than what we've agreed, it's over. Instantly, Julian smiled, a genuine, almost appreciative smile, and extended his hand. Deal, wife. Isabella hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking it. Deal, husband. What if the grand, opulent mansion of a billionaire stranger became your unexpected, temporary home, forcing you to navigate a world of unspoken rules and hidden complexities? Could a desperate mother and her innocent child find a fragile peace in this gilded cage? Or would the shadows of their unconventional arrangement prove too overwhelming? The move was simpler than Isabella Rossi had imagined. All their worldly possessions fit into 2 worn suitcases and a single cardboard box. Sophia clutched her favorite doll and a tattered teddy bear that had been Isabella's since she was a baby. Her small face a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Is this going to be our new house, Mommy? Sophia asked as they ascended the grand marble staircase of Julian Vance's sprawling Chicago estate, her small voice echoing in the vast, silent space. For a little while, my love, Isabella replied, her own heart pounding with a nervous uncertainty. Just for a little while. Julian showed them to their rooms. Sophia's was a dream, with a single bed adorned with fluffy pink sheets, a small desk, and even a beautiful dollhouse tucked in a corner. Look, Mommy, it's like a princess's house. Sophia shrieked, running towards the dollhouse, her earlier apprehension forgotten. Did you buy this for her? Isabella asked Julian in a low voice, touched despite herself by the unexpected thoughtfulness. I had it stored away, he replied, his voice carefully neutral. It belonged to my sister when she was a child. Isabella looked at him, surprised. Julian hadn't mentioned having a sister. Where is she now? She lives in Spain with her husband. We haven't seen each other in years. There was something in his tone, a subtle shadow in his usually guarded green eyes, that told Isabella this was not a topic he wished to discuss further. Isabella's room was at the end of the long, silent hallway. It was 3 times larger than their entire old apartment, with a massive king-size bed, an enormous walk-in closet, and a private marble bathroom that looked like something out of a luxury magazine. "If you need anything," Julian said, his voice formal, distant. "My room is on the floor below. Rosa, the housekeeper, comes every day. She can assist you with whatever you require." He paused, then added, "Rosa knows about our arrangement. Well, she knows you're my fiancé and that you'll be living here for a while. She doesn't need to know more." The first few days were undeniably strange, almost surreal. Isabella didn't know if she should have breakfast in the kitchen or wait for Julian to leave for work. She didn't know if she could use the vast, opulent living room, or if it was strictly reserved for his important business visitors. Sophia, however, adapted quickly, her innocent joy a vibrant splash of color in the otherwise cold, sterile mansion. Rosa, the housekeeper, adored her, teaching her English words while she meticulously cleaned, her kind eyes often following Sophia with a maternal warmth. Sophia had also discovered the sprawling back garden and spent hours happily chasing butterflies amongst the fragrant rose bushes. On Wednesday morning, Isabella found Julian in the kitchen, sipping coffee and reading news on his tablet. "Good morning," she said, her voice hesitant, unsure if she should serve him breakfast or simply take her own coffee and retreat. "Good morning," he replied, his gaze briefly meeting hers. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." They sat in an awkward silence as she prepared Sophia's breakfast. Julian observed her from the corner of his eye, as if he wanted to say something but didn't quite dare. "What time do you have to leave?" Isabella finally asked, breaking the uncomfortable quiet. "In an hour." "Why?" "Just so I know if I can use the kitchen peacefully," she replied, a hint of her old defiance returning. Julian actually laughed, a genuine, unforced sound that surprised her. "Isabella, this is your home too, at least for as long as you're here. You don't have to ask permission for everything. It's just, I don't want to disturb you." "You don't disturb me." Sophia came running down the stairs then, still in her pajamas, her hair adorably disheveled. "Good morning, Julian," she shouted, as if they were old friends. "Good morning, princess. Did you brush your teeth yet?" "Oops, I forgot." "Go on then. Brush them before breakfast." Sophia ran back up the stairs, her small footsteps echoing. Isabella was surprised by how naturally Julian interacted with her daughter, his voice gentle, his eyes warm. "Do you have experience with children?" she asked, curious. "Not much," he admitted, "but Sophia is easy to love." Those simple words, spoken with such unexpected sincerity, went straight to Isabella's heart. Not many men saw Sophia as anything more than a burden, an inconvenience. "Thank you." "For what?" "For treating her well. Not everyone does." Julian set his coffee cup down on the table and looked at her directly, his green eyes serious. "Isabella, I know this is strange for you, for me too, but I want you to know that Sophia will always be safe here. And so will you." There was something in his voice, a quiet reassurance, that calmed her frayed nerves. For the first time since she had accepted his outrageous deal, Isabella felt a fragile, tentative sense that perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right decision. That afternoon, Isabella Rossi went to pick up Sophia from the local daycare center where she had enrolled her, a place she'd found through her meager savings before Julian Vance's intervention. The director, Mrs. Peterson, greeted her with a warm smile. "Isabella, how wonderful to see you. I wanted to tell you something." "Is something wrong with Sophia?" Isabella asked, her heart instantly tightening with a familiar maternal anxiety. "No, no, on the contrary," Mrs. Peterson exclaimed. "We received a very generous anonymous donation this morning, enough to upgrade the entire playground and buy new educational materials for all the classes." "That's wonderful news," Isabella replied, genuinely happy for the small, struggling daycare. "Yes, and it came with a letter," Mrs. Peterson continued, her eyes twinkling. "It said it was from someone who knew a very hard-working mother who brought her daughter here. Someone who understood the importance of a safe, nurturing environment for children." Isabella felt a lump form in her throat. There was only one person who knew she brought Sophia to this specific daycare. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Isabella went to find Julian. She found him in his vast, minimalist study, engrossed in his laptop. "Was it you?" she asked without preamble, her voice a little shaky. "Was I what?" Julian replied, not looking up from the screen, his tone deliberately neutral. "The donation to Sophia's daycare," she pressed, stepping further into the room. Julian finally looked up, his green eyes unreadable. "I don't know what you're talking about. If someone wanted to help the daycare, good for them." Isabella approached his desk, placing her hands firmly on its polished surface. "Why did you do it, Julian?" He finally met her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a flicker of something soft, almost vulnerable, in his usually guarded eyes. "Because I saw how Sophia talked about that place," he admitted, his voice low. "And because I saw how you worried that they didn't have enough things for the children. You didn't have to do that." "I know I didn't have to," he responded, a hint of his old assertiveness returning. "I did it because I wanted to." Isabella stood there, speechless, unsure how to react. This man, who was supposed to be just her temporary contractual boss, was proving to be far more complicated, far more unexpectedly kind than she had ever imagined. "Thank you," she murmured finally, her voice barely a whisper. "You're welcome." But as she turned to leave, Julian stopped her. "Isabella?" "Yes. Tomorrow we go shopping for your clothes for the events. Are you ready?" She nodded, though inside, she felt anything but ready. "I'm ready." The next morning, Julian arrived for breakfast later than usual. He had dark circles under his eyes and looked as if he hadn't slept well. "Are you okay?" Isabella asked as she served him coffee. "Yes, just work." But Isabella noticed his hands trembled slightly as he took the cup. Sophia came running down the stairs, as she did every morning, and sat in the chair that she now considered hers. "Julian, I dreamed you had a giant dog, and you took me for a walk on it?" the little girl exclaimed as she ate her cereal. "A giant dog? What color was it?" "Brown like chocolate, and it had blue eyes." "How strange. Dogs don't have blue eyes." "In my dream they do." Julian smiled for the first time that morning. Isabella noticed how his face changed when he spoke with Sophia. He looked younger, less tired, almost happy. "Have you ever had a dog?" Isabella asked, curious. "When I was a child. His name was Bruno, and he was a German shepherd. He died when I was 12. "And you haven't wanted another one?" "This house is too big to be alone," he said, a shadow passing over his face. "But it's also too quiet to have a dog." There was a profound sadness in the way he said it. Isabella wanted to ask him more, but Julian abruptly changed the subject. "Ready to go shopping? I don't know what kind of clothes I need. Elegant dresses, shoes, maybe a coat. Nothing too exaggerated." "And Sophia?" "Rosa will stay with her. I've already spoken to the daycare director to let her know she won't be going today." Isabella felt a strange pang leaving Sophia, but she knew Rosa would take good care of her. They went to an area of the city Isabella had never set foot in before. The boutiques had French names, and the prices had no labels. "How much does all this cost?" Isabella whispered when a saleswoman showed her a black dress. "Don't worry about that," Julian responded, his voice firm. "It's part of the job." "But it's too much." "Isabella, if you're going to pretend to be my wife, you have to look like the wife of someone like me. It's not vanity. It's necessity." The saleswoman brought her several dresses to try on. Isabella felt uncomfortable at first, but when she saw herself in the mirror wearing a deep sapphire blue dress, she almost didn't recognize herself. "Do you see?" Julian began to say as she emerged from the fitting room. "Ridiculous, beautiful." Isabella felt a warm blush creep up her cheeks. It had been years since anyone had told her she looked beautiful. "Is that one okay?" "That one is perfect." They bought 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and a coat. When Julian paid, Isabella didn't even want to see the total on the credit card. What if the impenetrable facade of a powerful billionaire began to crack, revealing a hidden vulnerability, a shared experience of loss, that forged an unexpected, profound connection with the woman he had hired to play a role? Could shared pain be the catalyst for genuine love? On the drive back from their impromptu shopping spree, Isabella Rossi and Julian Vance were mostly silent. But as they neared a red light, Julian spoke suddenly, his voice surprisingly soft. "My father passed away 3 months ago." Isabella looked at him, stunned. She hadn't expected such a personal, raw confession. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her own grief for her late husband, for her sister, a fresh, aching pang in her heart. "We never got along," Julian continued, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I always thought I had more time to fix things with him." "What did he die of?" Isabella asked gently. "A heart attack. He was alone in his office on a Saturday night. They didn't find him until Monday morning." Julian's voice cracked slightly at the end, a fleeting glimpse of the profound pain he usually kept so carefully hidden. Isabella felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to touch him, to offer some small comfort, but she held back, unsure of the boundaries of their strange, unconventional arrangement. "That's why this deal with the investors is so important to you?" she ventured, beginning to understand the immense pressure he was under. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He left the company heavily in debt. If I don't secure this investment, I'll have to sell everything. It was his life's work. It's the only thing he left me." He paused, then added, his voice laced with a bitter irony. "Besides the mansion, of course. But if you never got along." "Precisely because of that," Julian interrupted, his voice regaining some of its usual firmness. "It's my last chance to do something that would have made him proud. Or at least not disappointed." Isabella finally understood. This deal, this elaborate charade, wasn't just about money for him. It was about legacy, about a desperate, unspoken need for paternal approval he would now never receive. When they arrived at the house, they found Sophia sleeping soundly on the living room sofa. Rosa, the housekeeper, knitting quietly in a nearby armchair. "She tired herself out playing in the garden," Rosa whispered, a fond smile on her face. "She's been asleep for about an hour." Julian carefully approached Sophia and gently, almost reverently, picked her up to carry her to her room. The little girl stirred slightly and snuggled her small head against his shoulder. "Daddy's here," Sophia murmured, still half asleep, her small arms instinctively wrapping around his neck. Julian froze, his green eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, something unreadable. Isabella held her breath, her heart pounding. "Sure, I'm here," Julian responded softly, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "Go back to sleep, princess." He carried Sophia upstairs, his steps slow, deliberate. Isabella followed him, her own heart aching with a complex mix of emotions. When Julian had tucked Sophia into her bed and gently kissed her forehead, the little girl opened her eyes for a moment. "Tomorrow, will you take me to the park, Daddy?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "If your mommy says yes," he replied, his gaze meeting Isabella's over the sleeping child. Sophia smiled and closed her eyes again, already drifting back to sleep. Outside Sophia's room, Julian and Isabella stood in the silent hallway, the unspoken weight of Sophia's innocent words hanging heavy between them. "I'm sorry about what she said," Isabella murmured, her cheeks flushing. "She's confused. She doesn't understand." "You don't have to apologize, Isabella," Julian replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. "She's a child." He paused, then added, his gaze searching hers. "It's just, no one has ever called me that before." There was a profound vulnerability in his eyes, a raw honesty that touched something deep within her. They stood there in silence for a long moment, the usual barriers between them, the unspoken rules of their agreement, momentarily forgotten. "Shall we have dinner together?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. Can we order pizza?" "Pizza?" he echoed, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Yes, pizza," Isabella confirmed, a tentative smile playing on her lips. "Like a normal family." The word family hung in the air between them, a fragile, unspoken possibility. All right, Julian finally conceded, a ghost of a smile on his own lips. But I'm paying for the pizza. Julian, the pizza is on me, he insisted, his voice firm but gentle. It's the least I can do after my future wife spent the entire afternoon buying clothes. It was the first time he had made a joke about their situation, the first time he had acknowledged the absurdity of it all with something other than cold indifference. Isabella laughed, a genuine, unburdened laugh, despite her lingering nervousness, despite the uncertainty of their future. All right, she agreed, but I choose the toppings. Deal. That night, they ate pizza in the kitchen, talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily, surprisingly naturally. For the first time since they had met, it felt almost normal to be together. When Isabella finally went to bed, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about how Julian had so tenderly carried Sophia, about how he had responded when Sophia called him Daddy. Perhaps, she thought, just perhaps, this complicated, unconventional deal was far more dangerous, far more promising than she had ever imagined. What if a meticulously planned charade, a high-stakes performance designed to deceive the world, unexpectedly ignited a genuine spark, forcing two guarded hearts to confront the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that their contractual arrangement might be evolving into something far more real, far more dangerous. Friday arrived faster than Isabella Rossi expected. She woke with a knot in her stomach and her hands clammy with nervous sweat. Are you nervous, Mommy? Sophia asked as they ate breakfast, her innocent eyes wide with concern. A little, my love, Isabella admitted, forcing a smile. Why? Because today I have to go to a very important dinner. With Julian? Yes, with Julian. Sophia smiled, her mouth full of cereal. You're going to look like a real mommy and daddy. Isabella nearly choked on her coffee. How could a 3-year-old understand their complicated situation so perfectly? Julian arrived at noon with a pristine white box in his hands. What's this? Isabella asked, her curiosity piqued. A gift. For tonight. Inside the box lay a simple but elegant pearl necklace. Julian, this must have cost a fortune. It's borrowed, he clarified, a faint smile playing on his lips. From the jewelry store. Just for tonight. And what if I lose it? She asked, her voice filled with a sudden apprehension. You won't. That afternoon, Rosa, the housekeeper, offered to help Isabella get ready. She styled Isabella's dark hair in a soft, low bun and showed her how to apply makeup without looking overdone. You look beautiful, dear, Rosa said when they finished, her kind eyes shining. Mr. Julian is going to be speechless. Isabella looked at herself in the mirror. The sapphire blue dress fit her perfectly. The pearl necklace completed the look, and for the first time in years, she felt genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful. When she descended the grand marble staircase, Julian was waiting for her in the foyer. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair slicked back. He looked every inch the successful, powerful businessman he was. But when he saw her, his usually guarded expression shifted completely. Wow! Was the only thing he could manage to say, his voice a little hoarse. Am I okay? She asked, a nervous flutter in her chest. You're perfect. Sophia came running from the kitchen then, her eyes wide with admiration. Mommy, you look like a princess. And Julian looks like a prince. Thank you, my love. You be good for Rosa. Okay? Yes. Are you going to dance at the dinner? I don't think so, Isabella replied, a soft smile on her lips. Maybe we will, Julian said, winking at Sophia, a playful glint in his green eyes. In the car, Julian explained the details she needed to know. The investors are Thomas and Margaret Williams. He's 60, she's 55. They've been married for 30 years and have 3 children. They love to talk about family. What do I say if they ask how we met? You were my Spanish teacher 2 years ago. We fell in love slowly, and Sophia conquered my heart from day one. And if they ask when we got married? 6 months ago. It was a small wedding because we wanted something intimate. Isabella repeated the story in her head several times until she had memorized it. The restaurant was the most elegant she had ever been to in her life. The tables were adorned with crisp white tablecloths, sparkling crystal glasses, and fresh flowers. Waiters in tuxedos spoke in hushed, deferential tones. Thomas and Margaret Williams were already waiting at a table by the window. He was tall and silver-haired, with strikingly clear blue eyes. She was blonde, slender, and had a kind, welcoming smile. "Thomas, Margaret, I'd like you to meet my wife, Isabella," Julian said, placing his hand on the small of Isabella's back, a subtle, possessive gesture. "What a pleasure to finally meet you," Margaret exclaimed, rising to embrace her. "Julian hasn't stopped talking about you." "The pleasure is all mine," Isabella responded, trying to sound natural, her heart pounding. During dinner, the questions began gently. Margaret wanted to know about Sophia, about her previous job as a teacher, about their family life. "And how did you know Julian was the right man for you?" Margaret asked as they ate the main course. Isabella looked at Julian, and for a moment, she forgot she was acting. "Because he's good with my daughter," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Because he makes her laugh and treats her as if she were his own. A man who loves your child truly loves you too." Thomas nodded in approval. "Very true. Margaret conquered my children before she conquered me. And it was the best thing I could have done," Margaret added, her eyes twinkling. "Children always know who is a good person." The rest of Roston, assuming this is a typo and should be dinner, flowed naturally. Isabella felt surprisingly comfortable talking with them, and she noticed how Julian looked at her with admiration every time she answered a question. When Thomas began to talk about business, Isabella listened intently. Julian explained his plans for the company with a passion and knowledge that was undeniable. It was obvious he knew what he was talking about. "I like your vision, Julian," Thomas said at the end of the meal. "And I like that you have a solid family behind you. That speaks well of your stability." "Isabella and Sophia are my priority," Julian responded, taking Isabella's hand across the table. "Everything I do is for them." When he said that, he looked directly into her eyes. Isabella felt something shift in her chest. For a split second, she believed her own lie. What if a single, staged evening, a performance of calculated intimacy, left an indelible mark on two guarded hearts, blurring the lines between a desperate charade and an undeniable, dangerous truth? Could a shared glance, a lingering touch, ignite a fire that neither of them could control? As they said goodbye to the Williamses, Thomas shook Julian Vance's hand firmly. "We'll be in touch. I believe we can do business together." In the car on the way back, both Julian and Isabella Rossi were euphoric. "We did it!" Isabella exclaimed, a joyful laugh escaping her lips. "They liked us. You saw Thomas's face when you talked about Sophia's education? He completely melted," Julian chuckled, a warmth in his voice she'd never heard before. "And Margaret was so moved when I told her about the daycare." They laughed and celebrated throughout the entire drive, a shared, giddy relief washing over them. But when they arrived at the house and ascended the grand marble staircase, reality, stark and sobering, caught up with them. They stopped in front of Isabella's room. Julian still held the keys in his hand, but he didn't use them to open his own door. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, intimate, "for everything. Tonight, you were incredible." "You're welcome," Isabella replied, her own voice a little breathless. "I had more fun than I thought I would." They stood there, awkwardly close, the unspoken tension from earlier, from that kiss during the gala in the previous story, now a palpable electric current between them. Isabella could smell his cologne, a subtle, intoxicating scent, and see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Julian lifted his hand and gently, almost reverently, touched her cheek. "Isabella!" She closed her eyes, expecting him to kiss her, her heart pounding, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions churning within her. But after a few agonizing seconds, she opened her eyes and saw that he had taken a step back, his expression unreadable. "Good night," Julian murmured, his voice hoarse. "Good night," she whispered back. He walked to his room without looking back. Isabella stood frozen in the hallway, her heart racing, a strange, unsettling sense of disappointment washing over her. She had forgotten, just for a moment, that it was all a lie. What if the meticulously drawn lines of a business arrangement began to blur, and the cold, hard reality of a contract was slowly, undeniably, replaced by the warm, intoxicating allure of genuine human connection? Could two people, bound by a lie, truly find their way to an authentic, shared future? Isabella Rossi woke up on Saturday morning with the distinct, unsettling feeling that something had irrevocably changed. She lay in bed for a few minutes, replaying the events of the previous night in her mind. The way Julian Vance had looked at her during dinner, how he had taken her hand, the charged moment in the hallway when she thought, for a breathtaking instant, he might actually kiss her. She rose and put on her robe. Sophia was still asleep, so she quietly went down to the kitchen. She expected to find Julian already there, engrossed in his morning coffee and financial reports as usual. But the kitchen was empty. Rosa, the housekeeper, arrived half an hour later. "Good morning, dear. Did Mr. Julian leave already?" "I don't know. I haven't seen him." "How strange. He always has breakfast here on Saturdays." Isabella prepared Sophia's breakfast and waited, but Julian didn't appear. At 10 o'clock, Sophia asked, "Where's Julian? I wanted to show him my new drawing." "He must be working, my love," Isabella replied, though a strange, unfamiliar unease settled in her heart. The previous night had been perfect, too perfect, and that, she realized with a jolt, had scared them both. Sunday was the same. Julian didn't come down for breakfast, didn't appear in the living room, didn't play with Sophia in the garden as he had done on previous days. "Is he angry with me?" Sophia asked on Sunday night, her small voice filled with a child's innocent confusion. "No, my love," Isabella reassured her, though her own heart ached with a similar uncertainty. "He's just busy with work." But she knew, deep down, that there was something more, something unspoken, hanging heavy in the air between them. On Monday morning, she finally found him in the kitchen. But it wasn't the same Julian from the Friday night dinner. He was wearing a perfectly pressed shirt, his dark hair slicked back with gel, and he barely glanced up from his tablet as she entered. "Good morning," Isabella said, her voice hesitant. "Good morning," he responded, his tone cold, distant, without looking at her. "Everything all right?" "Perfect." "Why?" "For no reason." Isabella prepared Sophia's breakfast in a strained, uncomfortable silence. When the little girl came downstairs and saw Julian, she ran towards him excitedly. "Julian, I missed you. Where were you?" "Working, princess," he replied, his voice softening slightly, though his gaze remained fixed on his tablet. "Are you not going to have breakfast with us anymore?" "I have many things to do." Sophia looked confused, her lower lip trembling. She didn't understand why Julian was being so cold. "But are you going to have dinner with us tonight?" "I don't know. It depends on work." Julian finished his coffee, picked up his briefcase, and headed for the door. "Thomas Williams is going to call this week to confirm the investment," he said to Isabella without turning. "When that happens, our deal will be over." His words, so stark, so final, hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "That you won't need to stay here anymore." And he left without saying goodbye. Isabella stood in the kitchen, feeling as if she'd been slapped. What had happened? Why was he acting as if nothing had transpired between them? As if that shared moment of connection, that fragile spark of hope, had never existed. That night, Sophia refused to eat her dinner. "Why doesn't Julian want us anymore?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears. "It's not that he doesn't want us, my love," Isabella tried to explain, her own heart aching. "It's just that he's very busy. But before, he was busy too, and he still played with me." Isabella didn't know what to say. She couldn't explain to a 3-year-old that sometimes adults get scared when they feel something real, something genuine. The following days were the same. Julian left early and returned late. When they crossed paths in the vast, silent house, he would greet her politely but with a chilling, formal coldness. It was as if they had gone back to the very first day, when she was just the food delivery girl, an insignificant blip in his powerful, important world. What if the icy walls a man built around his heart were not a sign of indifference, but a desperate attempt to shield a secret pain? Could a moment of raw honesty shatter the facade, revealing a vulnerability that explained everything, yet changed nothing? On Thursday night, Isabella Rossi waited for Julian Vance in the dimly lit living room. When he finally arrived, well past 11, she was surprised to see him. "Is something wrong?" he asked, loosening his tie, his voice weary. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm, unwavering. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About why you're acting like we're strangers again," Isabella challenged, her gaze direct, searching. Julian sat heavily in the armchair opposite her, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm not acting in any particular way. I'm just being professional." "Professional?" she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her. "Julian, we live in the same house. Sophia misses you terribly." She was about to say, "I miss you too," but stopped herself, the unspoken words a painful lump in her throat. "Never mind. Isabella, what happened on Friday," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "was part of the job. We acted very well together. But that's all it was." "Is that all?" she pressed, her eyes searching his, desperate for a flicker of the warmth she had seen before. "What else was it supposed to be?" Isabella felt tears welling in her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. "You're right," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It was just a job." She stood to leave, but Julian stopped her, his voice suddenly urgent. "Isabella, wait." "What?" For a fleeting moment, she saw something different in his eyes, something akin to the man she had connected with over the past few days, the man who had shown her such unexpected kindness. But then, just as quickly, his cold, impenetrable mask snapped back into place. "Nothing. Good night." That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She lay awake, replaying every moment, every word, every shared glance since they arrived at this house. Had she imagined it all? Had she misread his kindness, his attentiveness, his surprising vulnerability? The next day, while Sophia was at daycare, Isabella began to pack their meager belongings. If Julian wanted them gone, they would leave. She wouldn't beg anyone to want them in their house, in their life. When Rosa, the housekeeper, saw her packing suitcases, she was alarmed. "What are you doing, dear?" "Packing. We're leaving." "Why? Did something happen?" "The deal is over." "What deal?" Isabella realized she had said too much. "Nothing, Rosa. It's time for us to go. But it's clear Mr. Julian cares a lot for you both. And Sophia is so happy here." "Sometimes," Isabella said, her voice heavy with a sadness she couldn't quite conceal, "things don't work out the way we want them to." That night, Isabella explained to Sophia that they would be leaving the next day. "Why, Mommy?" the little girl asked, her lower lip trembling. "Because this isn't our house, my love." "But I thought it was our house. And I thought Julian was like my daddy." "Daddies don't leave, my love," Isabella whispered, her heart aching. "And Julian has to work." Sophia cried herself to sleep that night. Isabella wanted to cry too, but she held back, her resolve hardening. At 5 in the morning, before Julian woke up, they loaded their suitcases into a taxi and left the sprawling, silent mansion. In the taxi, Sophia asked, her voice small, "Are we going to see Julian again?" Isabella looked out the window at the house receding in the distance. "I don't know, my love," she whispered. "I really don't know." Julian Vance woke up on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, a throbbing headache a dull counterpoint to the unsettling quiet of the Chicago mansion. He had worked until 3 in the morning, meticulously reviewing contracts, but his mind hadn't truly been on the intricate legal jargon. It kept drifting back to the strained conversation with Isabella Rossi on Thursday night, to the raw pain in her eyes, to the chilling finality of her words. He went down to the kitchen, expecting to find Sophia's half-eaten breakfast and her brightly colored toys scattered across the living room floor. A familiar, chaotic symphony of family life he had, surprisingly, grown accustomed to. But everything was perfectly, eerily ordered. Too ordered. "Rosa!" he called out, a sudden, inexplicable knot of dread tightening in his stomach. Rosa appeared from the laundry room, her usually warm expression strangely subdued. "Good morning, sir. Where are Isabella and Sophia?" "They left, sir," Rosa replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Left?" Julian felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "What do you mean, they left?" "Very early this morning. They packed their things and left in a taxi." Julian stumbled, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the cold marble countertop. "Did they say where they were going?" "No, sir." "But Mrs. Isabella?" Rosa paused, her gaze direct. She looked very sad. Julian raced upstairs to Isabella's room. It was completely empty. Not a single item of clothing. Not one of Sophia's beloved toys. Not even the faint, lingering scent of her jasmine perfume remained. He sank onto the edge of the perfectly made bed, burying his face in his hands. He had wanted them to leave, hadn't he? He had been the one to tell her their deal was over, that their time together had run its course. But now that they were truly gone, the vast, opulent house felt emptier, more desolate than ever before. The following days were a living hell. Julian tried to focus on work, to lose himself in the familiar comfort of numbers and contracts, but everything reminded him of them. The dollhouse in Sophia's empty room, the half-used box of cereal still in the pantry, the single pearl necklace Isabella had left behind on her nightstand, a silent, poignant testament to their charade. Thomas Williams, the investor, called on Tuesday to confirm the deal. "Julian, it's a pleasure doing business with you. Your wife made an excellent impression on Margaret and me. She's a remarkably intelligent and centered woman." Julian didn't know what to say. How could he possibly explain that his wife and daughter were no longer there? "Yes, of course, Thomas. Soon." He hung up, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. On Wednesday, Rosa, unable to bear his silent suffering any longer, finally confronted him. "Mr. Julian, may I speak with you?" "What is it, Rosa? Why did you let them go? What are you talking about?" "Mrs. Isabella and little Sophia. It was clear you cared for them deeply." "Rosa, it was just a business arrangement," Julian insisted, though the words sounded hollow, unconvincing even to his own ears. "Work?" Rosa shook her head, a sad, knowing smile on her lips. "Sir, I've known you for 3 long years. I've never seen you as happy as you were these past few days when they were here. You were different. Lighter." She paused, her gaze gentle but firm. "That little girl adored you. She asked about you every single day." Julian felt a sharp pang in his chest, a raw, undeniable ache. "Things don't always work out the way we want them to, Rosa. But they work out the way we decide for them to work out, Mr. Julian," Rosa countered, her voice filled with a quiet wisdom. That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He rose at 2 in the morning and went to his office. He had to finish some reports for the foundation his company managed, a charitable endeavor he usually delegated. He opened the foundation system to review the month's donations. Among the files, a folder labeled Rainbow Daycare Follow-Up caught his eye. Without much thought, he clicked on it. A series of photographs and videos, sent by the daycare to show how the recent donation had been used, opened on his screen. In the first video, children were happily playing on new playground equipment. Julian smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. In the second video, there was a reading activity in the classroom, and there, sitting on the floor, surrounded by a circle of captivated young children, was Isabella. Julian leaned closer to the screen, his heart pounding. Isabella was wearing a simple yellow dress, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked completely natural, completely, breathtakingly happy. The children listened to her with rapt attention. Sophia was sitting beside her, her small face beaming with pride as her mother read the story. And then, Isabella's soft voice narrated. The little duckling realized he wasn't ugly. He was different, but that's what made him special. Julian felt his breath catch in his throat. There she was, the real Isabella. Not the elegant woman from the Friday night dinner, but the compassionate teacher who loved children, the devoted mother who worked tirelessly for her daughter, the resilient woman who had faced down a school board to defend a student, even if it cost her her job. He continued to review the files. He found Sophia's enrollment form. In the emergency contact section, besides Isabella's number, there was another name, Julian Vance. He stared at the screen for several long minutes. When had Isabella put his name there? And why? He kept reading. In the observation section, the director had written, Sophia has mentioned a father figure named Julian several times. It's clear he is very important to her. Julian closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of his office, the weight of his monumental mistake crushing him. He had been an idiot, a complete, utter idiot. Isabella hadn't been acting during that dinner. She had been herself. And he, terrified of his own burgeoning feelings, had pushed her away, had hurt her, had preferred to wound her rather than admit he was falling in love. But it was too late now. They were gone, and he had no idea where to find them. He rose and walked to the window. The city, usually a symbol of his power and success, now seemed quiet, indifferent, at that early hour of the morning. Sophia, he murmured aloud, remembering how the little girl had called him Daddy that afternoon when he had carried her, her small arms wrapped so trustingly around his neck. He remembered her running towards him every morning to greet him, her infectious laughter as they played in the garden. And he remembered Isabella's eyes, the raw pain he had seen in them when he told her their deal was over. It hadn't been anger he'd seen. It had been profound, heartbreaking sorrow. For the first time in 3 long years, since his father's death, Julian Vance felt the overwhelming urge to cry. He had had a family, not a perfect one, not the one he had meticulously planned, but a real one, and he had, in his monumental fear, his monumental stupidity, thrown it all away. Now he had the investor's money. He had his company secured. He had everything he thought he wanted. But he had nothing, absolutely nothing, that truly mattered. He stayed in his office until dawn, watching Isabella's video over and over again, trying desperately to memorize the sound of her laughter, the warmth in her eyes. What if the realization of a monumental mistake ignited a desperate, frantic search for a lost love, a lost family? Could a man, stripped of his arrogance and fueled by a newfound humility, find his way back to the two people who had unknowingly shown him the true meaning of happiness? Julian Vance didn't sleep at all that night. At 7 in the morning, he was already dressed, a cold, forgotten cup of coffee on his kitchen counter. Rosa, the housekeeper, arrived at 8 and was surprised to see him there so early, his eyes red-rimmed, his expression a mixture of desperation and a fragile, burgeoning hope. "Didn't you sleep, sir?" "Not much." "Still thinking about them?" Julian looked at her, a silent plea in his eyes. Rosa had been with his family since he was a teenager. She knew him better than anyone, perhaps even better than he knew himself. "Is it that obvious?" "Like an open book, dear," she replied, her voice gentle. "And what do I do, Rosa?" he asked, his voice raw with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "I told them to leave." "Well, then you go and tell them to come back," she stated simply, her wisdom unadorned. "It's not that easy." "Yes, it is that easy, Mr. Julian," she countered, a knowing smile on her lips. "What's difficult is swallowing your pride." Julian finished his coffee and grabbed his car keys. "Where are you going?" "To find them." The problem was, he had no idea where to start. He didn't have Isabella's phone number anymore. She had changed it. He didn't know where she had lived before moving into his house. He didn't know if she had any family in the city. The only thing he knew, the only fragile thread of connection he had, was the location of Sophia's daycare. He arrived at Rainbow Daycare at 9 in the morning. It was a small but colorful building, with children's bright, cheerful drawings adorning the walls and a playground filled with laughter and activity. The director, Mrs. Peterson, greeted him with surprise. "Mr. Vance, what a pleasure to see you." "Good morning," I came to ask about Sophia. Ah yes, poor little thing. She arrived very sad on Monday. Said she missed her new house. Is she here now? Julian asked, his heart pounding. Yes, she's in the activity room. Julian followed her down a hallway filled with more children's artwork. When they reached the classroom, he saw Sophia sitting alone at a table, listlessly playing with some blocks. She didn't have her usual joyful spark. Sophia, you have a visitor, Mrs. Peterson said gently. The little girl looked up, and when she saw Julian, her face lit up completely. Julian, she shouted, running towards him, her small arms outstretched. Julian picked her up, holding her tight, feeling an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over him. He had missed her more than he could have ever imagined. Hello, princess. How are you?
Sad.
Why didn't you come say goodbye to me? The innocent question, so full of a child's raw hurt, pierced him like a knife.
I'm sorry, Sophia.
It was a very big mistake. Do you not want me and mommy anymore? I want you very much, he assured her, his voice thick with emotion. That's why I came to find you. Really? Really? Sophia hugged him tightly. Where's your mommy? She went to a job interview. She'll be back at 12. Julian looked at his watch. It was 10:30. Can I wait for her here? Yes. And you can help me build my block tower. The next 2 hours were the best Julian had had all week. He played with Sophia, met the other children at the daycare, and even helped with a painting activity, getting more paint on himself than on the paper. When he saw Isabella Rossi arrive through the window, his heart leaped into his throat. She was wearing a simple brown dress and low-heeled shoes. She looked tired, but beautiful as always. Here comes my mommy, Sophia announced, her voice filled with excitement. She's going to be super happy to see you. But when Isabella entered the classroom and saw him, her expression wasn't one of joy. It was a complex mixture of confusion and then something akin to anger. What are you doing here? She demanded, her voice sharp. I came to find you. Why? Sophia, sensing the tension between the adults, grew nervous. Mommy, Julian says he missed us very much. Sophia, go get your backpack. We're leaving, Isabella said, her gaze fixed on Julian, her eyes blazing. But Julian just got here. Sophia protested, her lower lip trembling. Sophia, please. The little girl reluctantly obeyed, but she looked confused and sad. When they were alone, Isabella crossed her arms. If you came to tell me you forgot something at your house, I didn't forget anything. I didn't come for that. Then, Julian took a hesitant step towards her. I came to apologize. Apologize for what? You did what you had to do. The deal was over. We left. Everything went according to your plan. It didn't go according to my plan, Isabella, he confessed, his voice raw with a desperate honesty. Because I never planned to fall in love with you. What if a desperate apology, stripped bare of all pretense, became the catalyst for a love story no one ever expected? Could two hearts, once bound by a lie, now find their truth in a shared, uncertain future? Julian Vance stood before Isabella Rossi in the brightly colored daycare classroom. The innocent artwork of children, a stark contrast to the raw, adult emotions swirling between them. Julian, Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what to say. I know I messed up, Isabella, Julian continued, his voice filled with a desperate sincerity. I know I behaved like an idiot, but when I saw how well everything had gone on Friday, how seamlessly you fit into my world, I panicked. I panicked because I realized I wasn't acting anymore. I was falling in love with you, with Sophia, with the idea of a real family, and I didn't know how to handle it. What do you mean? She whispered, her eyes searching his, a fragile hope dawning within her. I mean, I love you, Isabella, he confessed, the words tumbling out, raw and honest. I love you and Sophia, and these past few days without you both have been the worst of my life. Camila stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Julian, she began, but he pressed on, his voice gaining strength. I know I hurt you. I know I was cold, distant. But that wasn't me, Isabella. That was fear. Fear of feeling something real, something genuine, after so long. Fear of letting someone in only to lose them again. He paused, his gaze unwavering. But I'm not afraid anymore. Or rather, he corrected himself with a small, self-deprecating smile. I'm still terrified, but I'm more terrified of losing you both than I am of anything else. Sophia came running back into the room then, her small backpack clutched in her hand. Are we going home now, Mommy? She asked, her innocent gaze shifting between the two adults. Isabella looked at her daughter, then back at Julian, her heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. To which home, my love? She asked softly. To the home where Julian lives? Is that our home too, now? Julian stepped closer to Isabella, taking her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her. If you want it to be, yes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It can be our home too. And this time, Isabella, it's for real.
No contracts, no performances.
If we're going to do this, we do it for real. Isabella squeezed his hand, tears welling in her eyes. Okay, she whispered, a radiant smile spreading across her face. But with one condition. Anything you want, he replied, his own eyes shining. No contracts, she stated firmly.
No performances.
If we're going to do this, we do it for real. As a family. Julian smiled, the first genuine, unburdened smile she had seen from him in a week. For real, he confirmed. Sophia shrieked with excitement and threw her arms around both of them. A spontaneous, joyous hug that sealed their unconventional, yet undeniably real, new beginning. And as Julian held the two most important women in his life, he realized, with a profound, humbling clarity, that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life, without even knowing it. A family. What if the greatest love stories weren't born from perfect beginnings, but forged in the fires of adversity, built on the foundations of forgiveness, and illuminated by the unwavering light of a love that dared to choose, again and again, to be real. 6 months later, Isabella Rossi woke to the sound of laughter drifting in from the garden of their new home. She peeked through the window and saw Julian Vance chasing Sophia among the blooming rose bushes. The little girl, her face alight with pure, unadulterated joy, shrieked with delight as he playfully pretended to be a tickle monster. Help, Mommy! The monster's going to eat me! Sophia cried out when she saw Isabella watching from the window. Don't let the princess escape! Isabella responded, joining in their playful game. It was Saturday morning, her favorite day of the week. She put on her robe and went down to the kitchen. On the table, fresh flowers Julian had cut from the garden sat in a simple vase, their vibrant colors a cheerful greeting. The local newspaper lay folded beside a steaming cup of coffee, still warm, and a small handwritten note that read, Good morning, beautiful. I love you. Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet, profound happiness. Julian had started leaving her little notes since they moved back in together, small, heartfelt messages she found tucked in her purse, taped to the bathroom mirror, or hidden among her books. She prepared breakfast while listening to Julian and Sophia's playful shouts from outside. They no longer lived in the opulent, sterile mansion. 2 months after their heartfelt reconciliation at the daycare, they had decided to move into a smaller, cozier house in a quiet, family-friendly Chicago neighborhood. Julian had sold his company to the Williams investors for a substantial amount, but it hadn't been about the money. He had realized, with a clarity that surprised even himself, that chasing his father's dreams was no longer his own. He now worked as an independent consultant, a role that gave him more time, more freedom to be at home, to be present. And Isabella, with Julian's unwavering support, had finally returned to teaching. This time at a small community school where she knew every child by name, her passion for education reignited. We're here, Sophia announced, bursting into the kitchen, her hair disheveled, her cheeks flushed with happiness. I'm so hungry. Julian followed, carrying Sophia on his shoulders, his own face alight with a joy Isabella had never seen in him before. What's for breakfast? He asked, his eyes twinkling. Pancakes, Isabella replied, a warm smile on her face. The favorites of a certain little princess? Yes, with lots of syrup. During breakfast, Sophia recounted her elaborate dream from the night before. I dreamed we all went to the beach together, she chattered. And Julian taught me how to swim, and we built giant sandcastles. And what if we make that dream come true next weekend? Julian proposed, his eyes meeting Isabella's across the table. Really? Sophia asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Really, he confirmed. But only if you eat all your pancakes. Sophia began to eat faster, making Isabella and Julian laugh. Their shared joy a tangible presence in the sun-drenched kitchen. After breakfast, Julian offered to do the dishes while Isabella and Sophia got ready to go to the park. Are you coming with us? Isabella asked, a hopeful lilt in her voice. Of course, he replied. Just let me finish this. At the park, they met Mrs. Peterson, Sophia's daycare director, who was walking her grandchildren. What a beautiful family you make, she exclaimed, her eyes warm with genuine affection. It's so clear you're all very happy. Isabella looked at Julian, who was patiently pushing Sophia on the swing, and felt her heart fill with an overwhelming gratitude. It hadn't been easy. The first few months together, truly together, had been a period of adjustment, of learning to live as a real family. Julian had had to understand that being a father wasn't just about playing and buying toys, but also about setting boundaries and helping with homework. Isabella had had to learn to trust again, to believe that he wouldn't leave when things got difficult. They had had their first serious argument when Sophia got sick, and Julian wanted to take her to the most expensive hospital in the city, while Isabella insisted that the neighborhood clinic doctor was perfectly capable. It's not about the money, Isabella had tried to explain. It's because I don't want Sophia to grow up thinking that you always have to buy the most expensive thing to solve problems. Julian had eventually understood. He had grown up in a world where everything was resolved with money, but Isabella was teaching him that the most important things in life couldn't be bought. They had also had their first disagreement about discipline when Sophia threw a tantrum because she wanted another toy, and Julian had immediately caved. She needs to learn she can't have everything she wants, Isabella had told him later. Otherwise, she'll become a spoiled brat. But she looked so sad. Sometimes, daddies have to do things that hurt them to teach important lessons. Julian had learned to say no, and he had discovered, to his surprise, that Sophia respected him more when he set clear boundaries. They had even tentatively discussed marriage. Why? Isabella had asked. Aren't we happy like this? Yes, but... Julian, I don't need a piece of paper to know you love me, and I don't need an expensive wedding to know this is forever. What if something happens to me? What if Sophia needs something and I'm not here? Then we'll figure it out together. But we're not getting married out of fear, Julian. We'll get married when it feels right for us. In the end, they had decided that marriage could wait. First, they wanted to be sure they could be a family without needing documents to bind them. That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Isabella and Julian sat on the comfortable sofa in their living room, watching a movie. But neither of them was really paying attention to the screen. What are you thinking about? Julian asked, his voice a low murmur. That 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, Isabella confessed, her voice soft. And now, I feel like it's just beginning. Do you regret anything? Regretting taking so long to trust you? Yes. And anything else? Nothing else. Everything that happened had to happen for us to get here. Julian held her tighter. I love you, Isabella. And I love you, Julian. There was no romantic music in the background. No flowers, no dramatic declarations. Just two people who had decided to build something real together, day by day, with patience, with honesty, with a love that had arrived in a quiet whisper but had come to stay. Did you enjoy this love story that began with a food delivery and ended up building a real family? Isabella and Julian show us that true love doesn't always arrive with flowers and grand promises, but with small, daily decisions, with mutual respect, and with the courage to choose each other again and again. If this story reached your heart as it did ours, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who believes in authentic love. Your support helps us continue creating stories that remind us that families are built with love, not just blood. What did you like most about this story? Was it the moment Sophia called Julian daddy? Or when he decided to look for them at the daycare? Tell us in the comments what your favorite scene was. And we also want to know, where are you watching us from? It's incredible to know that these stories reach hearts all over the world. If you want more stories like this, that make you believe in real love and second chances, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any. We'll see you in the next story.